My name is Jenny, and I'm a wife and mom raising 2 kids. But I used to live a more glamorous life as a TV reporter. I was on the nightly news interviewing pop stars and politicians. So when I said goodbye to TV and hello to motherhood, I suddenly discovered what we moms are up against. We live in a world that tells us to be rich and famous, thin and successful. You know, almost nobody says, "Oh, hey, you're a mom? That is fabulous." But you are fabulous, and I'm here to tell you why.
It's the ChannelMom Show, celebrating you with Jenny Dean Schmidt.
Brought to you by the Healthy Marriage Project. Just click on one of their ads to find out about a healthy relationship workshop near you.
Don't mind me. I'm just barely here.
Hi, Jenny.
Picked myself off the floor. Welcome back to the Channel Mom Show, where we're celebrating you, Mom. We really are here for mothers. Often a mom's job is thankless, and people forget to thank you, and you feel unappreciated and overworked. But we're here to encourage you, cheer you on, give you great advice, tips, so on, things to make your life better as a mother and for your family as well. And you know what? I am going to work very hard on being as, I think, Italian as I can be here. Carla Sarabacca is a school psychologist in the Denver area. She has worked with elementary, middle, and high school students for the past 11 years. She earned her degree from UNC, the University of Northern Colorado, and currently practices school psychology in a high school setting, working with regular and special ed students. And the reason we've asked her to be here today is this incredible survey out about cities that spoil their kids the most from bundle.com, and some incredible things on that website and in that survey about how kids spoil them and where they spoil them. And Chris, you're going to be very interested in this, being an East Coast kid yourself.
Uh-oh.
Carla, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
We're happy to have you. So you read the survey right along with me, and we're going to get to it in just a minute, because I think people are going to probably want to know what the spoiling looks like and how they defined it and where it happens the most. Denver comes in a very interesting place, so people are going to want to hear that. The Midwest has a very distinctive place on the survey, and so does the East Coast. But first, I want to quickly review some online dictionary definitions, and then Carla and I are going to chat about what it is to be spoiled. But having the character or disposition harmed by pampering or over-solicitous attention, to damage severely or harm something, especially with reference to its excellence, value, usefulness, sometimes freshness in the case of fruit. And it's very interesting how that can translate, even when you're talking about fruit being spoiled, into a child being spoiled. Another definition is to diminish or impair the quality of, affect detrimentally, and finally to impair, damage, or harm the character or nature of somebody by unwise treatment, excessive indulgence, etc., to spoil a child by pampering him. Okay. So, Carla, you see kids every day, and you certainly must see some spoiled children. Can you put a measure on this? How common is what we just described in definition form? How common is this in America, and do you think it's been on the rise?
Well, I think that it's common to a certain extent. When you talk about the, quote, spoiled child syndrome in terms of how Dr. McIntosh defines it, mm-hmm. It has to do with overindulging, and that overindulging your child with material things can result in spoiling when it's also paired with not providing essential guidelines or teaching your children appropriate behavior.
Yeah, or discipline, right? Discipline or boundaries.
Right. And, and also I think you have to keep in mind that discipline does not necessarily mean, in terms of punishment, being bad. It's trying to teach them the appropriate behavior or what we want from them. Mm-hmm. And so that I do see that in the school setting, at least, when, cases where parents want to rescue their child versus helping their child learn from that behavior.
Describe that. What do you mean they want to rescue their child instead of helping their child learn from something they've done wrong?
Well, it could look like, my kid doesn't deserve a D on this exam, or doesn't deserve a D because they didn't turn in their homework. Look how smart they are. It's those kinds of things all the way down, even as extreme as wanting the school to not impose a consequence for behavior.
Yeah.
Whether it's drinking at a school function or, those kinds of things. Parents some, not all, because I think parents try to bring their best game.
Yeah.
But in a misguided way, will really want to, feel like they're keeping their kid from harm when in effect they're not.
Right. And I think it's very tough, and especially in our modern society, because I think sometimes, I don't know, you go to a public event or a baseball game to watch your child or something, and it's almost like parents kind of subtly compare who's doing more for their kid. And sometimes it's financially. In other ways, it's just how are you indulging your child today? Where are you taking them? What activities are they involved in? So on and so forth. And I have found a syndrome is common in so many kids, and I've shared this with my parent friends, where at the end of the day, they want one more thing. Like it's never, you've taken them to Elitch's, then you've gone out to dinner, and they're like, well, where are we going to go for dessert? Or can I just go see the ducks at the pond now, or whatever it is? But I find that my kids always want that extra thing, and I think, how many times have I indulged them when they've asked for that extra thing to the point where they now expect it? It's not good to do just one thing. Aren't a lot of our kids now programmed to think, but just one more thing, one more treat, one more place? Can't we just go to this one last thing? Now can I have a sleepover? Do you know what I'm talking about?
And it does seem like we are slowly becoming a society of I want me, give me more, and when is enough enough?
Yeah.
But there's also people need to understand there's typical patterns. A 2-year-old having a temper tantrum in and of itself doesn't mean they're a spoiled child. But when a parent doesn't know the effective way of dealing with that and then essentially just gives in,
right,
that's when those patterns will start. And then you can see developmentally in a 2-year-old to an elementary age student, middle school, and on to high school, that pattern has been set in the student or the child, then it's that expectation.
Right.
We all like to be pampered.
Yeah.
We can feel guilty if we spoil ourselves sometimes, but then we realize, when there's that boundary and that guideline, buying your child gifts doesn't necessarily mean that they're spoiled. But when there's that expectation that they will always get a gift, and if their best friend gets an iPod, then they need an iPod. And if their best friend has an iPhone, well, they need an iPhone.
Right.
I think that's when it becomes there's also other things to take in consideration in terms of a child's temperament and, the parent's behavior. So it's like I said, it's a chicken or the egg thing, and when is it too much?
Right. Well, and I want to talk about this in a minute after we talk about the survey briefly. What does it look like? How do you see a spoiled child manifest, poor behavior, and then what do you do about it? So we're going to talk about that in a minute. But let's quickly do this bundle.com survey, just a few notes from it. As I understand it, what they did was they tried to look at an average for what parents spent on their child over a 3-year period. And they took different areas of the country and they looked what they did. And then if you were above the average, you were guilty of being a town that overspoiled your child. And if you were below the average, you didn't spoil your kids as much. And they used some funny examples, like Blue Ivy Carter, which is Beyonce's new baby, has a 2,200 square foot nursery. My house is barely bigger than that. A 2,200 square foot. Actually, no, my house is smaller than that. And they talk about the enormous amounts of money that people spend or feel like they have to spend on their children. Many of them spending over $500,000 on their child before they leave the house, which is just incredible. But the places coming in as the worst were, Chris, New York City, then Brooklyn, if I'm getting this right, New York City, then Brooklyn, then Miami, Florida, then, believe it or not, Minneapolis, Minnesota. I grew up in Minnesota. Not necessarily a place that you would think would indulge their children, but Minneapolis was 4th, and then Tulsa, Oklahoma, of all places.
Duh.
And then, Carla, you've read the same survey with me. The Midwest, other than Minneapolis, tended to be more frugal with their kids. Places like Wisconsin and Indiana, they tended to be more frugal. And actually, Denver, Colorado, where we broadcast this show from, really low on the list in terms of, and they spend below average for the average American on their children. Don't spoil them, don't indulge them, apparently. So, Carla, I thought that was kind of good news. What do you think?
I thought it was good news as well, and I don't know if it just speaks to, okay, we buy them less video games and get them outside more. I hope that's part of it.
Yeah. I try to do that. By the way, I didn't mention that L.A. And San Diego were in the top 10 We do have this image of California, and it kind of came true. A couple Texas towns as well, or at least one, and Atlanta, Georgia as well in the top 10. But I was so glad to see Denver in the bottom. So Carla, let's get on, because people are going to really want to know this. What does a spoiled child look like? Because I can certainly see when my kids are behaving in a spoiled way, and I always remind them of the starving children overseas, which they hate. But I think, oh my gosh, you're really going to throw a fit over this when there's a child who's dying right now in Africa. And I know that's a cliche, but it's the truth. So what does a spoiled child look like, and what's the remedy, especially in the world that you're in? How do you take a hold of those kids that are acting spoiled?
Well, there's different schools of thought, but to describe, I think, what a spoiled child looks like, we already talked about, and I liked your example of you can spend all day and then they want that ice cream cone. You know, you just spent all that money at E-Riches or wherever, and they want that, and the little child could look like the pouting, you know, leading all the way up to a temper tantrum, and parents can give in and buy that ice cream cone when they had just bought them the licorice or those kinds of things.
Yeah.
When you look at it in terms of what I see in the high school setting, it's spoiled kids can manifest in peer issues where, girl fights or even bullying situations where the boy thinks, well, I need to bully my way into this group of people because I must. It's a thought process where the world must be the way I need it to be.
Yeah.
And they're called thinking errors. And if it doesn't, then I'm unlovable. And when that's reinforced, then a student can believe, or a child can believe, that that's the only way that I'm going to get my needs met.
Right. And by the way, we have about 2 minutes left. When this happens, when the child feels like the world kind of owes them, or that they get reinforced, they feel better about themselves if everybody does it their way, that child's not going to be much good to society. So what do we do about that?
Well, I think those patterns can be broken with consistent parenting and consistent discipline in schools and everything else. There's ways of doing that it's not quite as punishing, but there's ways of working with families in terms of getting to the heart of what's going on.
Briefly, can you tell me one way?
Help.
One quick way that you tell a parent to redirect a child in that situation.
Well, you have to realize that there should be situations where kids could have choices, but parents have to live with those choices. Your choices shouldn't be do what I say or you're grounded until you're 30.
Mm-hmm.
Your choice should be two things that the child will want to do that you can live with.
Mm-hmm. Clean
your room now or clean your room later, but you're going to clean your room.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that, and if you give up and ground them, they never clean the room, so they never learn the behavior that you really wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have to stick with what you're asking of them.
The parents have to set the boundaries and set the guidelines for the child, or the child is never going to learn that.
In the last 30 seconds, Carla, do you think this is something that parents need to address more in our society?
I think they do. I think it can only help our society when I think we would be more less selfish maybe, and kids would have better development of their character and their moral compass.
Yeah, yeah. I really would love for children to get the vision, the perspective by the time they're 18 years old and leave the house, that it's not about them, it's about what they can do for others. And we're all guilty of it as adults, that, hey, what about me by the end of the day? But man, isn't it nice when we can look at others, right?
But I think we're all works in progress, and if we can recognize that and keep and stay consistent with it, I'm always hopeful.
Yeah.
That's the only way that we can make change, is when we're hopeful.
Absolutely. Well, Carla, we thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you.
All right, take care.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
By the way, if you want to look at that survey, it's more at bundle.com. You have to go through their articles, but it's one of their most recent articles about which cities spoil their kids the most. Denver, Colorado, faring very well. I'm sure Bailey would be like way at the bottom in terms of spoiling their children. We're just good mountain people.
You don't spoil.
Actually, I really do, as I just admitted. We're just too bad.